Hey, welcome back to the channel, guys. Now, 2 videos back, I posted a video entitled Bad Plumbing Work, and that was all about a job I was called in on last year. New homeowners bought this home. They were having nothing but problems with the steam system. And when I got there, it was apparent what was going on, at least from what I could see physically. And they had other work that had been done once they bought the house. They called a contractor in. A guy came in and he did some pipe work. Problem is he put some PEX tubing in, and here in New York City, PEX tubing is not legal. So I went there and I corrected some of that. But the real problem here was the steam boiler and the way it was piped. And this video basically is about the repiping of that steam boiler. There were nothing but problems with the way this thing was configured. And, I gave the homeowner some options, and they decided, let's see if we can get this done, because they just moved in. They love the home. And it was apparent that the steam system wasn't going to work the way it was piped. So that's what this video is about. Just sit back, relax, enjoy the process. I did it in several days. I work alone. I don't hire people, unless it's absolutely necessary, if I'm lugging in, some heavy stuff. But for the most part, I do all this stuff by myself. So sit back, check this video out. Hope you learned something. And to all you pros out there, you're going to realize immediately once you start looking at it, wow, what kind of job is this? Anyway, I'll check you guys out on the other side of this video. So this is what this thing looked like when I got there, and I was like a little perplexed. I'm looking at it, I'm going, wow, I don't even know how this is working. Obviously, you could see that line down there at the bottom where that T is. There's a plug in the bottom of the T, and every time the thing would cycle for steam, it would fill up with water. Just crazy. And I don't know if you could see there, the water feeder, see the orange handle there, feeding the automatic water feeder. No bypass, no backflow preventer, no check valve. And if that thing ever gave up the ghost, he had no way of shutting it off and not being able to feed water to the boiler. That T had a plug in the bottom of it, and that thing was just filled up with water. So every time this thing cycled for steam, just pushed the water up into the mains and through, and it came out the radiators upstairs. There was a lot of banging, a lot of clanging, a lot of noise, needless to say. And yeah, so this had to be corrected. And over the past couple of weeks, I made several small trips there, and I revamped the whole thing. And the rest of this video is about, the process. And in the room next to the boiler, you could see here that main I had to drop about 3.5 inches because it was not pitched at all. It was actually almost level. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and I'll show you what I did to correct this mess. All right, so we start the process. I come in here with my M18 fuel brushless Milwaukee hacksaw, and I start cutting away. I'm not one of them guys that come in with a hammer and start whacking away to start cracking cast iron fittings if I can avoid it. I like cutting things out. I think it's a little more of a surgical approach, if you will. And I just cut the pieces inside the fittings, and it works out good for me. I know a lot of guys like to come in here with a lump hammer, but that's not my style. So here I am starting to cut off what was supposed to be a main coming out of the boiler. Figure that out. And then I stepped up to the mains. That the one you're looking at there is the one going to the front of the house. The white one there to the left is the one going to the rear of the house. And I cut out all my pieces the same way. I use the same technique when I'm cutting out stuff. Here I am cutting out the line going down to the equalizer. And then I proceed to go in there with my Sawzall, and I cut the pieces out, and you'll see that coming up. It's just a technique that's worked for me, and I can do it without causing any damage. Here I am again. I'm up at the ceiling there, cutting off the main going to the rear, coming up from the boiler. And what I do is, you'll see coming up in this next frame, I took the top of the jacket off so I could get down to the line coming out of the boiler. And actually, this is the T that I cut out. And I expect to see a lot more water in there, but because, this was last winter, this has been off all summer, so a lot of that condensation kind of evaporated, and that's why there wasn't a lot of water inside of this thing. And anyway, so I moved on. Keep cutting. Look at that pie plate. How do you like that for a cover at the base of a chimney? Well, needless to say, I changed that. I put a proper 8-inch cap on there, but you got to check this chimney out later on in this clip here. We had a couple of fried birds and beer cans in there. Anyway, so now I take my Diablo 9-inch carbide tipped Sawzall blade and I shear off this piece coming up out of the boiler after I remove the jacket. And again, the technique works for me. A lot of guys will try to get some big wrenches and unscrew that thing, but that's not my style. Here I got that piece and just basically sheared it off. And then coming up next, I use what I used to cut the pieces out. I use Lenox hacksaw blades, or Lenox Sawzall blades, excuse me. And I make a simple cut. I'm like one cut, and then with a caping chisel and a hammer, I'll knock the piece in. So if you knock one side in and then you knock the second side in, that piece will literally come right out. So grab it with my channel lock pliers and it comes out relatively easy. There you go. Simple, simple, simple. A lot of guys don't like to do this, but again, that's my style. What can I tell you? Then I moved up to the mains, and coming up, I believe this is a rear main. So I basically, there you go. I cut the piece off flush. Then I go in there with my Sawzall. I make one cut. I don't go all the way to the threads. I stop just shy of the threads. Then I get my caping chisel and I knock the pieces in. And you'll see that coming up in this next frame. There it is. Very, very simple. And I don't have to go taking a lump hammer and whacking out those cast iron fittings, because frankly, those cast iron fittings are perfectly fine. So if I can take a piece out like this, why not? And there is the piece. Very, very simple. Very, very efficient way of removing things without killing yourself. You got to work smarter, guys, not hard. And then in the front, I had to remove a coupling. So again, what I did is I sliced the coupling with my Sawzall, not all the way through. I know it looks like I nicked the threads. I didn't nick the threads. Don't be misled here. I did not nick those threads. And then I get a caping chisel and I stick it in that slit to the left of the coupling and I whack that thing. And when I do that, the coupling pops open. And at that point, I can use a channel lock, a wrench, and remove that coupling. And you'll see coming up in this next frame, I didn't damage that pipe at all. I'm very happy with the way this turned out. There you go. There's the coupling, and there is the piece of pipe. So that worked out really well. And what you're going to be looking at next is my weapons of choice, if you will. My Sawzall blades of choice. I use the Diablo 9-inch carbide tipped blade for cutting extra heavy cast iron. I cut cast iron fittings with it. Then I use the Lenox blade for making the cuts to remove the pieces. It's a little finer. It makes a little finer cut. So that's why I use the Lenox to remove the pieces. And my sealers of choice, I have my Blue Monster PTFE tape and my BlueBlock, which is bulletproof, but don't get it on you, folks. Better have a can of lacquer thinner with you, because this stuff makes a mess if it gets all over the place. And here I am. I'm starting the process of constructing a new header, which wasn't existing. And, it's a painstaking process, but you got to take it a little bit at a time. And, like I said, I went back on several days. I did like half days, 3/4 days, and started to do this rather than go in there gangbusters and get it all done at one time. Because, it was warm. I did it during the month of September, and it's been pretty good weather-wise, pretty warm. Then I dropped down to the side of the boiler there, and I'm cutting out some more pipe. And again, there's my Diablo blade. Then again, same technique to remove the piece. I went in there with my Lenox blade. I made one cut and knocked it in with the caping chisel and a hammer. And there's my Leatherman tool, and I'm basically just curling the piece out. And Works out, like I said, it works out pretty well for me. Here we have another shot of the side of the boiler. You can see that nipple coming out of the T. That's supposed to be a close nipple. That's way too long, so I had to knock that out. I took that out, revamped that loop. And coming up next, you're going to see my my setup down the gentleman's basement. And this is my newly acquired Milwaukee M18 cordless pipe threader. Love it, love it, love it. It beats me lugging around a 300 machine. Takes a little getting used to. But I did a video about this actually, and I'll post that up in the cards up above in the description below for anybody who's interested. But it takes a little getting used to, because on this, the actual die head turns, and you have to kind of refine your technique for getting oil in there, as opposed to with a machine, the pipe turns, and you can just keep feeding the oil in, one port of the die. When I got to the side of the boiler and looked at the glass gauge, I don't think this boiler was ever flushed, ever, ever, ever. And this is what I found. I didn't expect to see that, but they have a washer and dryer in this house, and the dryer's up against the side of the boiler that you need to service, and nobody could ever get in there. Here is that loop, the Hartford loop, where I have that, I replaced that long nipple with a close nipple, went down, and I have two drains, one on the back and one in the front. You're going to see I extended it to the front of the boiler next to the dryer, so that when the dryer goes back, he's able to put a hose on there and flush this. And I will give him instructions on what to do. Here's another shot of that, and I ran that copper line right out to the front of the boiler. This is going to have some weekly maintenance in the winter months. There's no question about it. And I'm going to show him exactly what to do to keep this from getting clogged. Now, on the right side, I put a full port ball valve in there, and he's got a bucket there, and we're going to be flushing that on a weekly basis in the heating season. And then you can see the ball valve on the left side down at the bottom there. That's going to be used to flush it weekly, no question about it. I had to drop the front main approximately 3.5 inches because that line was just about level. And there was water sitting in there, and when the steam started to come up, it was popping and banging like a madman. And, there was no getting around it. I had to do something to get that condensate back to the boiler. Now, the extreme opposite end, it's fine because it pitches the other way, and then it drops down to a wet return. So everything, I think I'm very confident that it's going to be fine once we turn the heat on. Right now, I still have it off. I told him I'm going to go back once he's ready to turn it on. Now, getting to the water heater here, you're going to see this was the p.e.x going in. Now, the original feeder was being fed hot water. Manufacturer doesn't want hot water going through the feeder, so I had to pop a T in the cold water side for the new feeder. And as you can see here, there's the T with a new valve going to the heater. And although that connection looks wonky, trust me, it doesn't leak. I had a bear of a time lifting up on that cold water line, dropping down, but I got that in there nice and tight. There's no leaks. There's the backflow preventer with the vent going down. Here's another shot. Now he's got valves feeding the feeder itself. So if the feeder goes bad, he could shut it. And he's got also a manual bypass. And down at the bottom, you can't see it, is a spring-loaded check valve, which I added, which was missing. And here's an alternate view of that. And, moving right along, that pie plate just cracks me up. It just cracks me up. It's crazy what people do. It's absolutely crazy what people do. And this was from the old feeder, some craftsmanship. I don't know who did this. I think the previous homeowner and his friends did this. As horrible as it looks, it didn't leak. But man, check out this workmanship. This is just crazy, crazy stuff. Here's another shot of it. And that was going, in and out of the feeder. And it's amazing. Now, coming up here, you're going to see the base of the chimney. When I took that pie plate out, I found all this mess in here. Had a couple of barbecued birds, a couple of cans. I referred him to a chimney sweep that could put a cap on top. I told him he has to get a cap on top of his chimney. He currently does not have a cap. It's got to be put on there. And coming up next, the exhaust from the water heater was going into a piece of rotten 4-inch pipe. and they just shoved the 3-inch into the 4-inch and cemented around the remaining space. They didn't even put a proper reducing fitting in there to go from 4 to 3. So I put a new sleeve in, a new 4-inch sleeve. I put a proper 4x3 reducer, reconnected everything, and zip screwed in everything. So everything's nice and secure. And you're going to see here is another view of that coming up from a different angle. And it's just crazy what people do. Here you go. Now, I couldn't get a proper hanger that I like to use when trying to support smoke pipe. But you know what? This is heavy-duty band iron. And like I said, this is all zip screwed together. It's not going anywhere. But yeah, I mean, I was happy with the way it turned out. And here's another view. You can see the front main, the rear main, and the piping configuration on the boiler starting to come together. I actually also changed the gas cock on that water heater. You can see that gas cock feeding the water heater. I changed that. You'll see that coming up next. And pretty much, this is basically the way it looks. And one more thing, I said to him I can get an electrician in here to straighten out that electrical box. He said he was having electrical work done, and he's going to have his electrician do it, because I told him that really is bothering me, the way that looks after I revamped your whole boiler. I got to look at that crooked, ridiculous switch. Anyway, here you go, guys. This is what it looks like after it's all done. And like I said, I'll be going back when it gets a little cooler out. I want to put some boiler liquid in there, boiler water treatment in there. And I will give you updates once we get this thing running as to any other issues up top. But I got my fingers crossed. All right, guys, so what did you think about that? Crazy, crazy, crazy. Let me address a couple of things. Now, I know that electrical work, it was also a nightmare, and I recommended to the homeowner that, you know, I can get an electrician here and straighten out that box and get everything all nice and neat. But he said he was having some electrical work done, and he said that he'll tell his electrician, you know, to straighten all that out, which was fine, because I know I did all this beautiful work, and you got that wonky looking electrical line there. Now, as far as that gauge glass and bottom gauge glass cock of the boiler, they were clogged pretty bad. I don't think anybody pulled any maintenance on this boiler ever. They never drained any water out of it. When I get back there to turn this system on, once the weather starts to turn cool, I'm gonna, you know, give my kind of service schedule to the homeowner and tell them how they're gonna have to take water out of that boiler, at least on a weekly basis, in my opinion, especially out of that full port ball valve on the right side of the boiler, and also on that drain I ran to the front. You got to take water out of there. You know, steam boilers they just naturally produce muck, and you got to get that out of there. You know, if that stays in there, it causes problems. When I actually had the equalizer apart, I looked inside that T, and I sent a snake, you know, a drain cleaning snake in there along with the hose, and I flushed that thing out for quite a bit and got that really nice and clean running. So I don't foresee any problems. I'm also going to put some water treatment in the steam boiler once it starts running on a regular basis. I just don't want to put, you know, my water treatment in there in a cold boiler. I want it to run. I want it to get it throughout the system. One more thing I wanted to mention, I did mention to the homeowners the best thing they could do was insulate the front and rear steam mains. Now, I did quote them a price to do it, but they decided they wanted to undertake that project themselves, which I have no problem with. So when I get back there to turn the heat on, I expect to see those front and rear mains completely insulated, which will be a good thing. Now, for those of you who are considering working on steam systems yourself, I think the best thing you can do is go out and get yourself a copy of a book called The Lost Art of Steam Heating. It's by a gentleman called Dan Holohan. He's now retired, but I've attended nearly every one of his live seminars. As far as I'm concerned, he's the godfather of steam heat, hydronic heat. He is the foremost expert on anything to do with heating, and I highly recommend you go out and get yourself a copy of that book. I will leave a link to that book in the description below this video. So I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. For all you pros out there, I'm sure you've seen stuff like this. And for all you novices out there, this is what goes on in the field. You know, people hire people, or people think they could do it themselves. But if you're going to do a job like this yourself, you got to research, guys. You got to research. So with that in mind, if you guys are new to the channel, I would highly recommend you subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you'll be notified of when I post a new video. Also, keep an eye out here for one of these two videos. They're going to pop up, I think, to either side of me. One of my shows, one of them YouTube shows. I look forward to you stopping by my channel often. I know you have choices when looking for plumbing repair videos. I'm honored you're here. Stay well. I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video. And as always, happy plumbing.